All right, everybody, hello, and welcome in this afternoon. Let me drop down some of that background music for a second. So, welcome in today to this special edition of Retro Tech. I thought that the dogs would be finished, but apparently Brutus would like to get an extra drink before we get started. So, if you hear any slurping in the background, it's certainly him. And so what we've got going on today is we're going to restore this Sony PVM, and this is a 14M2MDU. And thanks again, everybody, for being in today. And I will be monitoring the chat for anybody who's live. So again, we're going to get in here. We're going to restore this. And to do that is going to require us to take it apart. And then we're actually going to service the circuit boards. And that means we'll be replacing a bunch of capacitors. And if you look down in the corner of your screen, I'll switch over to another camera view for a second. But these are, well, this is my handmade list of a specific capacitor kit for this monitor. So I have a G board kit right here, and then a C board kit. And unfortunately, these are not generic for every single M series. There are a few variations between the M series monitors, so that's why you'll see a lot of these items scratched out and then changed up a little bit. But this is the main board list, and this main A board is a pretty tricky one to get out, and the kit actually has 28 capacitors on the main board, which that's the big chunk of the work, because on this particular build out, we've only got 2 caps on our C board, which is our neck board, and then 8 caps on our G board. So let's switch back to our main camera view here with everything on the screen. So I went ahead and spent some time this morning creating this cap kit. I've actually got all the capacitors in a fishing box here. You can see in this lower hand corner picture. That's one of the tricks to keeping parts separated, is to store them in these fishing box kits, and then you can separate your caps. And it makes it a little easier as you're going and installing those caps. You'll know where they're coming from. And so that's all ready. I've got my tools all here ready. So hopefully we can get through this. As you can tell right now, the CRT is running. I have it in composite video mode to start off with here today. And we have Vigilante, which is a game for the PC Engine / TurboGrafx 16. Just a side scroller, beat 'em up. And it is one of the games that actually has a little bit of a video to run. So I was letting it run. And the reason I have it in composite is that way I can also show off the vector scope down there and then the waveform monitor. And what I was initially doing was going through here and checking some color calibrations on the monitor. And surprisingly, the TurboGrafx, if you have a good one and you have a good attachment that is it's a external attachment you can add to the back of it called the spark plug. If you're lucky enough to be able to get one of those, it puts out a really clean composite video signal. So that's the reason I'm testing with it and all this today. But we're going to, in a second, take this all apart. And maybe before we do that, I'll show you that what I'm doing today as far as like the actual restoration, this is all like preventative maintenance to help it down the road to be able to live a long life and be used and not have any issues. So we're not going to do a full like replace every single capacitor on this CRT because there's almost 500 capacitors in this, and a lot of them are not going to improve our quality of video, and a lot of them will last 50 years just because they're not going to get hot. And so we're not going to replace all of them. Like I said, we have the full kit here. That this is the 9 times out of 10 these are the capacitors that will give you issues as you use one of these over time. So we're going to do these cap kits on it, and then let's just look at our 240p test suite real quickly so we can get a baseline for how this looks as it does now. And if you look at our color bars, the SCMP color bars, that turn that brightness up a little bit. And so our color bars look pretty good. And I know you can't see it that great on your screen, but I can tell that the signal that's coming in from the TurboGrafx, it's sent through this waveform monitor and the vector scope, and that's all within a really good tolerance, especially for one of the older consoles. So that's just shows you that it's in really good shape. It doesn't actually have any problems right now, this CRT, but I do need to get it recapped, and that way I will feel better about it. It'll be ready to go and possibly be, sold to a Patreon member. So what we're going to do next is we'll start tearing this thing down, and I'm going to power it off, and I want to give a shout out to Delusional's Arcade. Thanks for joining me today, Delusional. Good to see you again. Good to see you, Belmont. Got some other people here. Alejandro Diaz, welcome. Gracia Fanal, welcome. Everybody, thank you for coming again. So I'm going to turn this CRT off, turn the vector scope off, and I've got this on a spinneroonie. Make sure we don't knock that console off. Take the console, get it out of the way, and set all that to the side. And now we've temporarily removed all our trip hazards. Let me get this line back up in our screen. We want it. And I've got it on like a spinning thing, contraption here, so you can get an easier view of things on this monitor. Now we'll go through a couple of important points as we start off here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove this shell. If we just look at the back really quickly, I've gone through this monitor in depth in other videos, but just some ideas that we're working with today. This one's from January of 2001. Probably can't see that on the screen, but that says definitely the 14M2MDU model. The thing that makes these the most desirable amongst these M series is the fact that you get 2 inputs down here, one for component and RGB and component and RGB, but that is unique to this monitor, where a lot of the M series only have one line, so you can't actually, at least with this one, you have two lines, so you can set one for component and one for RGB, and makes life a little bit easier there. This is not like a VGA connector, so don't get excited if you see this. And then this is a remote control, so you can plug an external remote in, and then there's actually some DC 8-volt power out to power a device. But again, these are all communication devices with the actual CRT. It's not something that, this is not an input down here. But these are the two big inputs as far as RGB and component. And then you have a line A, which is composite video, and a line B, that is S video. And to disassemble this shell, it is super easy. And all we have to do is remove 4 black screws on the back here. And I just pointed them out with my Sharpie. But if you'll get close and look at the shell, you'll actually notice little arrows on the back here. So that makes it a lot easier to get those out. So you have those 4 in the back. And then we have 3 chrome screws to remove on each side. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started by removing these screws. And it's always nice to have some kind of tray or something to catch your screws in so you don't just lose them. But these are usually the moments that get edited out of the restoration videos. We're actually just unscrewing stuff. So this could take a minute or two. If you don't know much about this PVM and you just happen to be catching this stream, this is an analog only CRT. So technically it's only going to show 480i content. However, 480i inputs will show 240p naturally, which is the progressive low-end analog video input that everybody loves. So you only get those 2 display modes. This is at 240p and 480i. But the good thing is this is a multi-regional monitor. So it can do PAL, NTSC, even CCAM if it's in the form of composite video. So that all can be read and shown on this monitor on its own. It auto switches for that. A GVM. I believe I have solar service. I can't remember whether it's GVM or GDM. But is the GVM... Sorry, I was looking at a question from PO17 asking if I had ever serviced a GVM. Does that look just like a PVM? Like exactly like a PVM for the most part? I've not done one of those if that's it. I think it's the GDM I'm thinking of that are like the PC CRTs, which I have done a few of those. But no one's brought a GVM in. Alright, we're down to our last screw on the back here. Now, like sometimes people get tempted to remove the rivets on the back of the shell. And that's these black small rivets right here. There's a total of 6 of those also. Please don't do that. You really don't want to do that. They do 480p, the GDMs. Okay, yeah, I thought they looked all the same. I haven't actually had anybody bring one in. That's interesting. I'd like to see one or get one, but I don't know if that's something that wasn't as available in the United States, maybe, because it's not something that really has come across my desk very often. So I want to say thanks. A lot of people, I realized from looking at the chat that you guys have been here for a bunch of the streams lately. I really do appreciate you coming in and hanging out. This has been a little bit of a new direction for my channel. I went like 3.5 years without streaming anything. And then now I've gone and streamed more than making videos, but I thought that this could be a little bit more helpful. You could see some technique in action, a little bit more detailed. You always see something happen live. It's a little bit more exciting. So now I've taken all those screws out and I've just slipped the shell back a little bit. So it just slides back and then off. just slide it back like that, okay? And then let me show you just a couple of other interesting things here on the main camera. These are the rivets I was telling you about. Right here. Right in this area, this one. So you can actually split this in half and it will release from the cage. It will release this plastic area from the metal shielding shell. So you can do that, but again, I don't recommend you doing that. All right. Get this guy out of the way. And this particular M series was one that I did highlight. It was one of a set of two that I had purchased. Goodness, it's been a while that I had purchased. I've had a video on the channel, so I'll make sure and link to that when I show you the re-upload. So the first board we're going to service is this one right here in this cage. And again, I have everything unplugged, but we don't have to worry about discharging it to service this board. We don't have to worry about discharging the CRT. So we're going to pull this board first. What you have here is our power supply on the side. And it's always on the same side as your button on these style of PVMs. So if you have a 50 series, etc., they'll look like this, or any of the M's. And there's two screws up here that hold our power supply into place. There we go. So all you have to do then is, well, first off, if we look at the back here, this is another board we're going to service, our neck board. First, let's disconnect this right here, which is a cable holder on the back, and it's got this ferrite core on it. So let's remove that, open that up, and then there's another one lower down here we also need to open up. Another cable holder, just so that it will be open. Now, there, right here where my finger is, let me spin that around a little more. Right there is a screw to this shielding. This is screw to the shielding for a ground cable, and this needs to be disconnected. Okay, so I got to get that out of the way, and then that should be all the screws we need to worry about. So this is an interesting question we had come up from Caesar Kano. He was asking if this is an HR tube. And so the interesting thing Sony did was they actually considered the 600 line an HR tube for a while until they came up with the 800 line tube and PVMs. Then they went up to 800 lines being the actual HR standard. So once you have the 20M4U introduced and then the L series, that became the new HR standard. If you go buy an old 1954 Q, it'll say HR on it, though. And this one does not say HR, but sometimes you'll see medical monitors. That's because it's an M series. But if it was like the 1953, or I'm sorry, 1353, it would actually say HR. It would say HR tube in it. So that was just something Sony did later on, is add that better tube to the PVMs. So just lift that up and slide that out of the way like this. And then we're going to disconnect these points. Up here first is a degausser, and then that's just the switch for the front that engages the power right there. And then this up here is where all your power gets converted from. I'm sorry, that's off the camera a little bit. So I was just disconnecting these cables right up here, and then we're going to disconnect up here, and this is where the voltage comes out of this CRT or out of this power supply and goes off into the monitor to help it do its different stuff. Then we have our last part to unplug, which is our power plug And then I'm going to actually really unstable kind of on there because it's now super front heavy. So I'm going to remove the spinner while we're taking out all the boards so I don't topple the CRT in the middle of the screen. So we won't need to see the front. We can leave it on the back. Okay. Yeah, it's definitely a trick that, Sony came up with a better CRT later on, so they changed it to say the HR was better. All right, so again, we've got our board out. Now, if I switch around and go to our overhead view, it should be a little bit better. So here is the power supply, and I'm going to need to zoom back a little bit. Let's hope it handle that a little bit. Okay, sorry, Cole. Okay, so this is our power supply, and to get inside of it, we need to remove the shielding plate here. And then we can get in and look at the capacitors that are in the kit. And so this is just, you've got a screw here, here, a tray back over here with all our screws in it. And then a final screw right here. Now just lift this. See how this is kind of on a hinge up here. Flips in. So you lift it up and away until you get to about there, and then you just pull it up and out. It's not got any contraption to it. It's literally just like you slip it down in there. It hinges up. You got to hinge it up though, and then pull it straight out like that. And that's our shielding plate and our power supply. And then here's the power supply. But we need to still get this out of this plastic piece right here. And to do that, we have these push tabs where my thumb is. And if we hold it upside down like this and we just pull these tabs in, the board will slip out from under the tabs. They'll release the board. You just do it one at a time. There's 4 tabs in total. And then this end slips out. And there we have our bracket that holds our power supply in place. So that's out of the way. And now this is our power supply. Now this board is a single layer board, so it's not like the A board. It doesn't have components on both sides, just components on the one side, which is this side. And well, we're not concerned with every capacitor on this board. These large filter capacitors are not really an issue. We're not going to be worried about them. Now, for live streaming, I will discharge these capacitors because people will probably have a fit. But none of these capacitors are going to be holding enough charge to really cause any damage. But we can go through here and just use our little ended, just our screwdriver. And we'll make sure to ground all these points together, and that way we can discharge all these caps that are the bigger ones. And that's it. There's really only about 5 big caps. So there's the caps. Now the ones we're going to be interested in are more or less the smaller ones that are around these big filter caps, and that are in here next to the heat sinks also. And so one of them for sure is this 632 right here. this smaller one right here, any of these smaller ones like 640, any of those, 633, is that on the list? No, 633 is not on the list. Okay. And the ones that we're avoiding are those 5. So there's a couple more small ones over here, and that's on our list right there, 636, 630. And you can also verify that your PS values on the PSU cap kit matches the actual caps that you're pulling off the board. That would be smart, unless you've done it 100 times like I have. Now these 3 are also going to go. So there's only a total of 8 on this board we're changing out. 3 there, 3 here, and 2 over here. So all those are marked. And it should be pretty straightforward, simple. We're going to remove these 8 capacitors now. And we're going to do that by using the FR301 Hacko desoldering tool. And I just need to let this warm up for a second. And while that warms up, I might go in here and, just if I need to put some fresh solder in, that's always a good idea. If you ever, whoops. Okay. So, we still on? Yes. Okay. So we may, let's see. We're not going to hopefully need any solder on this. There's a lot of extra solder on these points that we're going to be removing. So we'll just wait for this desoldering tool to warm up. Let me go back to our overhead cam and we'll get ready to remove these caps now. I'll use the same tray right here to catch my caps that I'm removing. And we'll see if they are, looks like my tool has preheated and is ready to go. And I'm using the smallest tip that I have. I'm not sure the exact size of that, but it's the smaller tip on the Hacko FR301. And I have it all the way down to 1 on the setting here. So pretty much the lowest as possible. So I'm going to start over here in this quadrant and we'll remove these. Let's start with this one up here. This is C640. Ooh, so I'm not actually touching the board when I'm doing this. I'm only trying to touch the actual legs of the capacitor and the solder. And once it starts to flow, I wiggle the cap with my other finger. And that's how I get it out. It's usually the way I do it. So what we've got here is a 50 volt 10 microfarad capacitor, and that is C640. So you could also come back and check it against your list, and yes, C640 is supposed to be a 50 volt 10 capacitor. So that's 1 down, 7 to go. We'll just go for the one right next to it. This one's a little bit larger, but it's the same practice. And that way, when you wiggle the leg, you get all the solder around it and it doesn't reattach to the board. Like, it's kind of broken free and there's no solder holding it. So it comes out much easier. This is 160 volt, 47 microfarads, which is correct according to our list here again. And one more over in this zone, which is next to the larger capacitor. And 639, another 50 volt 10 capacitor. So just try to heat that up. Got that one loose. Okay. 639 or 39. This should definitely be a 50 volt 10. So let's see. Yep, 50 volt 10. All right, so far so good. That's this quadrant right here. And then we'll come over to the edge. This is next to our other heat sinks. And we'll get this 630 right up here at the top edge. Get it out. Oop. You know, you ever hear that? You hear that sound in your sleep, you know you've done enough cap jobs. You start to hear the old desoldering pump action in your sleep. All right, let's see here. This one is another 50 volt 10. It's 630, 50 volt 10. So matches our list, 630, 50 volt 10. That's great. We're on track here. Everything's good. Now, one more over here. The 636. Let's get it out. Let's see what it is. Double check it against our guide. Oops, this one's been a little bit more stubborn. Well, guy's not wanting to break free so easily. Let's get the other leg first. Yeah, that one's good. I see it. It's broken free. It's just solder didn't want to come out. Okay. 636 is a 50 volt 47 microfarad. That's correct according to our cheat sheet over here. That leaves us with the last zone of 3, which is right in the middle of this section right here. And so we'll get these 3 capacitors out, starting with 619 for all those Rey Mysterio fans out there. Right, this is a little bit of a bigger one. I think it's wiggled free. It feels free, but I'm going to just use my pliers to pull that tooth out. Booyaka! We got it here. It is a 50 volt 220. BM asked if this live stream is going to be uploaded. Yes, once we're done streaming today, this is going to go straight up onto the live section of Retro Tech on YouTube, and then you'll be able to go in there and watch the playback anytime you want. Now, just note that it does take about a day for the episode to fully upload. It takes a day for all the like live chat playback to show up and things like chapters to be able, well, for me to get time to add chapters. And also there will be subtitles. All right, next is 618. 618 is right next to 619. Small one. Again, if they're in here, get you a nice pair of pliers. If they're in here in these tight, hard to reach places, just pull them out like that. And this one is, again, let's see, 618. It should be a 50 volt 10 again, our favorite. 50 volt 10. So that's good. And we have one more capacitor, C616, which is a 47 microfarad, 35 volt capacitor. All right, now we have that capacitor out. It is 35 volts, 47 microfarads. Now, would you guys like me to take a second to test these capacitors with a capacitor tester? I can do that. Let's see. Ideally, something would be reading bad, but there's a plenty good chance that these caps will all read good. And some of them may have too short of legs for me to get into the tester. For example, this guy. This is a capacitor. This little tool is fun right here that I'm about to show you. It's cheap. It's on Amazon. And you just should be able to get two legs in. I think it has to be across from each other. That's the problem. You got to have legs long enough to lock it in the holder. And then you just press the button. And let's see what this says. No known part or damaged part. Interesting. Well, maybe, just maybe. I doubt it, though. I doubt this capacitor would have been bad. If it would have been bad, it wouldn't have worked. I just think the legs are too short for me to get a good contact in there. We'll try one more time. No, we're not getting a good reading on that one. I do have another tool. It's a little bit further away. Let's try one of these with the longer legs. The longer legs. And we'll see here. We'll see if it shows up as what it's supposed to be. Let's just stick the capacitor down in there. Make sure it's to hold on to. Well, this is funny. All right. Let's try and go the other way then. So I should be able to get some kind of a reading on these. But I was pretty sure that you had to go the other direction. Yeah, see? Oh, look at that. Finally picked one up. So here we have is our 47. Sorry if you can't see that. Maybe I'll turn that light out for a second. But this is a, it's hard to see on there. 47 microfarad capacitor. And we have an ESR of 1.5 ohms. So still, obviously, maybe a little bit of life in there. And let's try this, maybe a bigger one. I don't know if I can get these legs down in there. Just short, stumpy little legs. Unfortunately, they're not going to cooperate with me. Oh, maybe there we go. Let's try one more. Nope. Well, these small caps have larger legs. So I know it's kind of like a pain in the neck, but this is a good tool to help you troubleshoot if you, well, look at this one. This one is a 50. What's it supposed to be? So it's supposed to be 47 UF and the ESR is 2.9 ohms. Man, that's like, you could get this tester on Amazon, Belmont. If you send me a message on something, I'll send you a direct link to it on some other form of social media. But this capacitor has a 2.9 ohm reading, so it's much higher on the ESR, 3 ohms. So that means it's in worse shape. So that's a good one to a good example of one that's like really, you know, getting up there in ohms. Let's just do one more for the heck of it. Now, there are testers that can also let you do this in circuit. And here's another one. This is 10 microfarad. We're up to almost 3 ohms again. Now this is lower microfarad, so that's not as bad. Usually you can have higher ESR meter reading. Sorry. All right, Caesar, thank you for the $5 super chat. I have a capacitor tester. I have a bulging capacitor that reads 89 ohms. Obviously, it's bad, but it is bad, but is the correct value? How can I figure out the correct value? Is it if 89 ohms? So you can't read the value of the capacitor on the side of the. I wouldn't worry about the ohms. Just like, there's a tolerance level for ohms. You just need to get a capacitor that you can replace that one with. So if you cannot get if you can't get the capacitor to give you a reading on any tool, I don't know what you do. You need to get either the service manual that will have the exact rating for the capacitor in that spot, like I have written here. This is on the back of the service menu. Or you need to have a testers like this or something else where you can test the component and hopefully it'll tell you a digital reading like it did here. Even though the ohms are high, it'll tell you what the value of the capacitor is. The other way would be to read on the side, but if you can't read the side, then you're kind of, you know, up a creek without a paddle, I guess we could say. All right, so we're going to switch back here to the overhead cam. I don't know why I just switched that camera real quickly, but we'll do that. Cut the lights back on. And I am trying to see about one little issue it looks like I might be having with my streaming setup here. Let's hope not, but we'll see. This is all a new test setup. So what we're going to do next is we're going to get ready to install capacitors back into this. And like before we do that, we're going to clean this board a little bit. I've got another couple of handy tools here. Nothing too crazy. Now, somebody did ask about kind of grounding stuff, and I wasn't even sure exactly what they were meaning before the stream started, but just so you know, I do have a grounding strap thing that you can put around your wrist like this, or heck, I mean, sometimes, see, mine actually goes all the way to my wall, so sometimes I put it around my ankle, so I have like an ankle bracelet, because I don't, which is what I'm going to do right now, I promise. Look at this. I like to do it like this because that leaves my hands free and I'm not worried about it. But that literally goes to a ground for the main house and into the ground. And that's how I keep myself grounded. That's how I keep myself grounded so I don't introduce static electricity and zap a part here. I've got some ESD brushes, and basically I'm going to start by just doing a 1/over brush on the whole board, all the components, and even the big capacitors I've left in there, and the transformers and everything. There's not much debris or dust on here. I also like to inspect everything else as I'm doing this, like looking at, for example, all these, you know, resistors. You want to make sure that none of the legs are grounding out or touching a component, and you just want to make sure everything looks fine. You can also check for bad solder on these boards, and that's usually not a problem. So that's the first thing to do, is just get that loose debris out of the way. You can also use a smaller brush to get in between those hard to reach nooks and crannies, you know, like if you need to get in here and really get some of these components clean. Not saying that you would on this device or this particular board, but something like our A board is probably going to be a lot dirtier. So we'll do that. And the last thing we'll do is we'll get some Q-tips, some standard Q-tips. And then I've got some, unfortunately, my store was out of 99%, so I have 91% isopropyl alcohol here. And I'll just take the top off, dip my Q-tip down in there, and then I'll come over here and clean the tops of the pads where my components were removed. Make sure those are nice and clean. All the places where I removed those capacitors, just rub them. Oh, that's not the right spot. That's over here. Rub them. You may get some leftover flux residue from the last time the caps were installed at the original factory. That's really it, but it's always good practice to get in here, clean all these things. We got these last spots over in the middle here. Okay, that's all 8 of our capacitor holes right there. Yep, house arrest. Now, this is an absolutely fabulous tool to help you clean out, especially if you don't have access to a high-powered, like a high-powered air compressor. I have one upstairs, but it's obviously difficult to use that downstairs. This is good for inside. It also does a great job at dusting your like computers, anything. It's rechargeable. And it does a great job when blowing dust out of these boards. You can get in there. It's ESD safe too, so it's not going to damage anything. The same thing I'm going to do on the back side now. I'm going to dip the opposite side of that Q-tip, and I'll come in here and clean on the spots where I removed those capacitors and scrub them in there a little nicely. Make sure we get up all 8 of these points. Also inspect the integrity of everything. And I like to make sure, you know, if possible, I did no harm to the board, obviously. Sometimes you get to situations where there's nothing you can do about it. Some boards just age poorly or have a lot of stress on them and have weakened points. So you might be stuck repairing something if you're not too careful, or if you're not careful enough, I'm sorry. But one of the things about taking your time is just to try to make sure that you do the work correctly the first time. Okay, so that's those 2 over there, and then these 3 right here, and then there's another section of capacitors up in this area that needs to be cleaned. Get those 2 out of the way. You can see where Sony in their factory also, you know, they didn't do the perfect job of cleaning these boards after they installed parts, because you'll notice leftover flux residue on a lot of portions of the board. But just look how much stuff came off there. Just a bunch of nasty stuff right there. Just all that ooze. So my health has been really good. Thanks for asking, Cody Dragon. I appreciate it. I've been doing really well, so I'm happy about that too. And we're gonna set our cleaning stuff aside for a moment. And now we can get things ready to install the capacitor kit in the G board. So we don't need our cleaning stuff right now. We might need to keep it handy. And we should get our other capacitors ready, and that's in this kit over here. Also got my soldering iron. I'm going to turn my desoldering gun off for a moment and talk about some stuff here that I use. First off, this is the Kester rosin solder I use, rosin core. Here's the stats on it. 0.8 millimeter diameter. And I don't know why it says 3.3%, some kind of lead or something. I don't know, 44. I'm not too sure on that label. But this is what you want. You know, this Kester is a good brand, and you want to make sure it's the right diameter. So let's get ready to hopefully install some new capacitors. Here's our capacitor kit. We'll look at it real quick. And I have separated this out into a certain way. I said I used this for, there's about 40 caps in here. And we are looking at these 8 on this row are the ones that go to our G board. And I wish I'd have gotten this tool in that a friend of mine posted on Twitter about a week ago, and I retweeted it, that bends the capacitor legs so that they stay and fit nicely inside the board on their own, because that can be kind of tricky. We'll move this so you can see the capacitors still up here, and our kit over here on the right hand side of the screen, and we'll get started Let me make sure I've got my snips here, and those are good. Some other things situated and out of the way. And our first capacitor, 616. So let's see what we've got here. We're going to do these in the zones, how it's split out here. So let's start with this edge up top, which is 2 capacitors. That's 630 and 636. And that's up here, 630 and 636. Let me swing that around so you can see it that way. 636 is a 4750. 630 is a 50 volt 10. These are the 50 volt 10s over here. What I can remember is correct. Yes. So we'll put a 50 volt 10 and 630. And you want to make sure to match the long leg, which is your positive leg of your capacitor, with your positive marking on your board. So there's a positive marking, and then the negative is marked with a solid circle on the board. So I'll just sit that in there for right now. And then I will move on to the next capacitor, which is again 636, a 47 microfarad 50 volt capacitor, which is not that one. It's going to be one of these two right here, the thicker of these two. Yep, here it is. 50 volt, 47 microfarad. Same thing as before. That longer leg on the capacitor is the positive lead. So I just push that through there, and I'll bend those legs out real quickly. And you can see how they sit like this. And then we'll try to get them soldered into place. And let's see what happens when I do something. Hang on, I need to unplug an item. All right. There we go. And let's see. All right, cool. Yeah, I think I was draining my power outlet with one too many things if I have everything hooked up, including the stream. So thankfully, my soldering iron is coming on now. And what I'm using is the Hakko FX951, another ESD safe soldering iron. It's one of my favorite tools. And just look at this amazing tip on here. Really fine tip there. Love this thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and tack in to place these capacitors. Now, this is the kind of job where you don't really need to add any flux. If you are uncomfortable doing this, then you can definitely add some flux, but all that's going to do is kind of increase your cleanup time. Now, this is set to 750 degrees Fahrenheit, so I'll just come in here and tack this into place, just one of these legs to begin with. Do that. And with the reason I'm doing it like this is I'm just tacking it in, and then I'm going to come back in a second and finish the whole point up here differently. So I want to make sure that I can get those capacitor legs straightened. So they're just kind of held in place right now. That's obviously not our final solder that we're going to put on there. So just snip those sets of legs out of the way. And now this is something you want to make sure to do. Do not go back and solder the same leg you tacked in to hold this into place with first. You need to tack in the leg opposite of that, because if you heat up the one you just heat it up, your part will fall through and you'll have to redo it. And it's a little bit trickier once you cut those ends off. There's the one capacitor, and we'll take a closer look at it here in a second. There's capacitor number 2. Now I'm doing this far away. I do have a big noisy fan that I could be running, but hopefully we can get away with not having to worry about that on this particular job. Just heat those up, make sure that solder's good, and float on those components. That's our first 2 components. Let's make sure that everything looks good. So I'm looking, inspecting. I'm going to show you here. We'll come back and clean all these points at the end But this is 630. Those nice, good, clean solder points on there. And then over here, 636. And then if we look over on the other side, capacitors, they don't have to be perfectly lined up with the base of anything, but you want to be pretty uniform with the other components. So there we go. Great. Excellent. So 2 down, 6 to go. Do these next 6 a little bit quicker, but at the same time, I always love to go back and make sure that everything is done correctly. So we'll check 636 off our list and 630. And we'll move on to our next capacitor cluster, which I will choose to be this one above our large filter cap up here. There's 3 caps that go where my finger is, right in here. So we'll thread those through first. One right here, one right here, and one right here. We'll thread those 3, and then we'll tack them into place and install them. I do believe this 160 by 47 is one of them. Yes, it's C632. Looking for that positive marking, and we're going to stick our longer leg through that hole, and then we're going to line up our negative end of our capacitor. So there's that one. Next we have 639, which is another 50 volt 10. 639, 50 volt 10. It's over here right next to our big filter capacitor. And got to make sure that we line them up again and get the right orientation on this capacitor. We're going to make sure we're pointing it the right way. It's the quickest way to damage something is to insert and install one of these capacitors in the wrong way, you know, like backwards. And it's also something I've seen that's happened. I've seen people do it and it not cause an issue till hundreds of hours later, but when it finally catches up, it causes a real serious issue. And I'm not even joking. I have seen people install caps opposite of what they're supposed to be in PVMs. So the last one here is another, just double checking, 50 volt 10, 640 is a 50 volt 10 microfarad. Lining this up, positive to negative. Yes, this is Masters Safer asked if this is a Gamers Nexus mod mat, and the answer is yes. I have a collection of their mod mats. They're amazing, and if they weren't so good, I'd try to make some of my own. But they make some amazing mod mats, and I noticed that they make a like soldering mat now. It's brand new. Now I love the mat that I have here that I use for soldering, but that one is specific for mod work and like a solder setup. So I don't know. I might have to get that one too. I've got this one here on this, and then this is like their medium large, and then I have the ultra large one over on another workbench that's in another section of our shop here, and that one's phenomenal because it's ESD safe and it covers this entire large rolling bench that I have. All right, hold that one into place. We got all these tacked in. Again, I like to, this last one I'm going to bend back upward. Okay, we can cut these legs and finish the installation on these 3 caps. But that's, you don't really underestimate, or you can't underestimate how good it feels to work with the right tools and good tools. It just adds a whole nother level of confidence to your ability when you're sitting here working on equipment and hardware like this. If you have good, high quality tools, and also that they're performing up to task and they're cleaned and serviced, if they're in that kind of a shape, it really can make the whole hardware repair and modification experience enjoyable, a lot more fun, you know. Get some happy little solder down here. Get right into those deep crevices of that 160 volt capacitor. Oh, lovely, lovely. All right, we're Sitting here, 640 now. Getting in the zone. 640, 632, 639. I don't really like the way that 639 is looking. Get a little bit, oof, got it a little hot there. See, if you get it a little bit too hot, then capacitor will slip down. We don't want that. Okay. All right. Not too bad here. Obviously, we'll come back and clean that up. But let's make sure that all of our caps are in here. Go in the right direction. Everything looks to be good right in there. Those are 3 new capacitors. There we go. All right, our last little section is our probably trickiest section of this board, and that is this center area right next to our main transformer, which is this yellow piece. I will tell you something interesting about this as I go. Let me recheck and make sure that all the capacitors I installed are correct. That one's correct. 640 is a 50 volt 10, and so is 639, leaving us just these. So that's all good. This right here is a very tricky part. So this can actually vibrate and cause a lot of noise in PVMs. It's not always the case, but sometimes people will get a PVM that's extra noisy, and it sounds like, again, higher whining, bigger, higher whining than even the flyback. And it can be transformers like this. And the CRT will have smaller ones on the A board and other boards. So if you do have a whine on this part, the best thing to do is try to find a salvage one. Save on Pat will sell some of these, so you can look him up and find them, or to go through, and you can try to reflow solder on that part, and hopefully maybe that'll help a little bit with the vibration. But you can also try to cover it in epoxy if you're really wild, and that may help, but that doesn't always work. So just a note, if you do have noises, it can be those parts, the transformers. The last 3 capacitors is a 10 UF50, which is 618. And then we have 616, which is the 616 35 volt 47 microfarad capacitor. That's that other small one, and then there's one more. I don't even need to look, right? Just use my hands. A 220 microfarad 50 volt capacitor right there against the heatsink. Get all those in place. I'm sorry, I was out of screen there for a second. I'll bend these legs and make sure that the caps are nice and secure in there. And there we go. You can see them right in this area of your screen, the legs, if you look closely. And I'm going to go ahead and tack in the legs right here. Maybe we'll try to zoom in a little bit. Get a little closer to that. That'll be a little bit better. Rather than, I don't know that I like that light glaring back. Do that. Add some different light. Okay, let's try some side light here. Where I'm going to hit up this point right here. And then finally 616 over here. Straighten all these other legs out. Everything looks good. Come through here. Snip. Snip. And snip on the tip. Only the tip. Snip that tip. Says the rabbi. Here we go. 619. 616. Add 618. We're soldering in that second leg. Let's reflow the solder on the other side. Clean my tip there. Get a little bit of fresh solder. About all three of those points. And there we go. We have, let's see that better. It kind of looks really good. It doesn't, you didn't need really extra solder flux on there. I mean, not solder, I'm sorry, flux, and don't want to use too much solder. Nice, make it nice and as easy as it can be. That should be all the work we need to do on the board for like that. We'll need to come now and do the same thing we did a little while ago, clean it again. So we're going to get in here now and clean the board in the same manner as you saw me do this earlier. We're going to get a little bit of alcohol and just rub it on these places right here and get that extra flux that comes off the rosin core solder. Like, it'll shoot out flux as it heats up, and we don't want to really leave that. You could leave that here and probably not have any issues, but it just looks gross. One of the things I find to be severely annoying is when I go in and service a piece of equipment that was obviously serviced by somebody and they just didn't do like this step right here, and so it's all nasty, and this solder will just look worse and worse and worse over time if you leave it there. I mean, I'm sorry, again, I'm not talking about the solder itself, I'm talking about that flux residue. So that's those three, and then we'll flip around, clean off these two up here, right up in the power zone here. Sometimes you'll notice, look at that. See, if I clean over here where another part was installed from the factory, look how much look how much stuff is just on the board naturally. Kind of gross. But what are you going to do? Next one down here, rub around it too. And that's the end of that Q-tip. Let's get another fresh one. Okay, we got one more area to clean up. That's over here. We got the big capacitor that we installed, 632. And then two more over here. Sometimes this residue will kind of get hardened, and you can come back once you've dried it off, and you may even have to clean it additionally by scraping off around the solder points. You'll need to sometimes come in here and clean it even more. So hopefully that won't be the case, but I guarantee that will be the case before this whole job is done today. And then our finally number 3 right here. And get our alcohol out of the way. And then we will zoom out a little bit. And I'm going to come in here and just hit this with some air. Okay, there we have what looks to be pretty plain board. So I'll just come through here and take this ESD brush, do a good scrape over those zones again that I worked on. And now you can see why it takes so long to do these CRTs. I mean, we're already into this stream an hour, and I've only gotten the first board out and pretty much serviced. And you know, I just want to make sure that everything is correct. We will check the capacitors again in our last area. Make sure everything looks right. They're all facing the same correct direction. 619 is that. 618 is a 50 volt 10, and that is a 50 volt 10, and then 616 is the 35 volt. Yes, that's right. Okay. So it's always good to go in and double, triple check all your work, especially if you're the only one looking at it. You might make a mistake, and you only get one chance sometimes to do this the right way. All right, everything's cleaned up in here. And just take one last look at this board. Everything looks good. All the soldering looks really good. Get in here. Zoom in to some of the points that we changed these capacitors on, so you can have a final look at them. We didn't have any kind of issues with our board and any kind of damage. All that was avoided. So that's a really positive thing. Now we're just going to slip this whole thing back into its plastic shell, if I can find it. Let me see what I've done with the plastic shielding now. Interesting. Can't be too far away from me. Get everything set up, and then you forget where you set something. We'll just continue. Oh, there it is. Right in front of me. Here's my two pieces. Starting with this board and sticking it back in the frame like that. Let me add a little bit more light, maybe. Zoom out a little more for you guys. And I'll put this back in, and I'll show you how this goes. And you're going to want to have, let's see, it's going to go this way because this connection right here needs to fit where the fuses are. So you sit this right here, slide it in like that. See, it slides into these 3 slots right here. And then you just snap all those posts right down. And then you have it set in here. Right? Caesar, you can usually use this tool to get out this Hakko FR301. You can use it with larger tips to help get out snap-in capacitors. Again, you need a larger hold tip, but you can do it that way, or you can use solder wick and try it the old-fashioned way. So that's it. Let me close up our cap kit since we're done with the first of 3 boards. And then we just need to reinstall some screws over here and hopefully not have any issues, right? The good thing is we have a pretty easy way to make sure that we did the right thing, and that is to just turn around and hook this up into the PVM again and give it a test. And then we'll move on to the neck board if everything is good on the power supply. And you might say, well, you know, why not service all these separately? The good thing about servicing a board at a time, a single board at a time, if you have an issue, if it was working fine before you serviced that specific board, then all of a sudden after servicing a board, if it, like, for example, if it started showing an issue after I did this, I'd know that it was something I did or something happened while I was restoring this power supply. could have put in a part incorrectly, or something could have happened, like it could have knocked a component loose or caused a bridge with just a loose piece of material between 2 points. So it's always good to get in here and check again, make sure everything's good. I'm going to blow it out just one more time. We're going to get ready to install it. All right, let's go over here to our all cameras reporting for duty. And we'll get this power supply right back where it came from. Now, I'm not going to bolt it back in and all that. But what I can do is connect everything back to where it was. And then we'll power it on. And I'm not concerned about maybe letting it run too long or anything. We're just going to do a quick power test. I probably won't even put a video signal into it. We'll just run it for a second. We do want to make sure everything's plugged in. We'll leave our ground disconnected for a second, because again, I'm not going to worry about that until after. So what we can also do is we don't have to, there's an extra set of hooks on the side of this PVM shell case for the power supply. It's right here. It's 2 hooks here, and there's 2 hooks here, which are the normal hooks you set it on when you're installing it properly. Well, for test mode, we can set it on these other hooks, and it'll kind of hang off the side like this, so that nothing's risk of being damaged doing this. But it gives us, see how it gives us a little bit more freedom, room to work around it while it's open. So we'll get it situated around here like this. See how that kind of just hangs on there. Everything's connected, and we're going to need to just plug in the CRTs. Let's see what happens. So let's hope for the best. Take a second here, put in our power, and see what happens. I don't want to make that connected until after. Get this plugged in. Okay, should be good to go. Knock on some wood. Hopefully everything went good. Turn some power on down here. Okay. You could hear the degausseur coming on. Once I hit power on, let's turn this overhead light out. And then check. Yeah, see, there we go. Our screen's coming back. So we'll just leave it here for a second. I think everything is good. We just finished up servicing our primary power supply, which is one of the 3 major boards on this monitor. Again, I want to say thank you to anybody. If you have any questions to this point, I'll take a second. And before we move on to the next board, I'll be glad to answer anything. Take a quick breather. Things seem to be going pretty good on the pacing of our video. I think we're going a little bit slower than I thought we might, but that's okay. Better, again, to be safe and sorry than to make a mistake. So just let me move some of my gear around here a little bit, and we'll get things out of the way so that we can get ready for the next board. And this next board should be pretty much nothing. It's according to, there's a possibility for it to have, let's see, it's a possibility to have 5 capacitors, but I believe it only has 2 according to the manual. So we should be able to do that pretty quickly. And look at some other things on that neck board, but For the most part, that should be it. So everything looks good on the chat. Let's switch over here to all camera. We're going to power this guy back down. Unplug it. And unplug the power. And then we're going to move on to the neck board. And we will, let's get some background music going again. Sorry, I don't have a super long playlist, but I have some, something to set the mood, get you relaxed and calm. Now, there's a little bit of a process to get this neck board off. I want to make sure that I get you in a good viewpoint so you can see it. Let me pull our bottom camera out of the way a little bit. Stick with you here. Move our microphone over this way. So this is our neck board, okay? And to get the neck board out, it's going to require us to remove some cable connections. Like this is where our color goes in and main commands. We got that. On the other side, we got our high voltage connection point on the opposite side. There's a little ground connection right here. We'll get that out of the way. Ooh, finally. It's gonna be a little tricky sometimes. I do have a little bit of epoxy and caulk in here that I'm just going to try to clip through with my clippers. I'm just going to try to break it loose a little bit. Well, I need something a little better than that. It's so old, I may be able to forcefully pull it backwards. I'm trying to evenly pull it so that it will... Did get it somewhat snipped out with the snips. Let's try the other side. Excellent. Hopefully that'll be enough. Yeah, it's just got some old caulk right in there holding it. Yes. See, there we go. That's what I'm talking about, that white crusty stuff right there. Again, this is a board we can service. And we don't have to worry about the anode cap right yet, okay? We don't have to worry about discharging anything yet. It's not something we've had to really do yet. But here is the C board. So it comes out of here. Here's the two connection points. There's a major connection point here for high voltage. Color and commands come in here. And then that's where it connects to the CRT tube. Some potentiometers here for some important adjustments. And our ground connection right here. A little ground connection right there. All right, let's take a look. Switch over. Let's see, we can zoom down in here. Our C board. Wow. So, as I said, we shouldn't have a lot of capacitors on here. We've got two, like I had thought. C713 and C705. So it should have a 25 volt 100 right here, which is 16 volt 100. So that's one I've upgraded. And then this is a 250 volt 4.7 513. That is. But let's check this out. Ooh, we got to test this capacitor. This one's actually bulging. Can you see it? That's really cool. So it's bulging. So hopefully it's got a bad reading. And we'll see here. Let me plug in my desoldering tool, and we're gonna get ready. Yeah, PO17. This one cap is bulging for sure. Look at that. I'll try to get in there a little closer. Let it focus. Oh yeah. That one's for sure bulging. It's hard to say. It's not like a huge bulge that you can see really well, but it's definitely bulging. We're gonna get our soldering tool plugged in. Give it a little test, let it warm up. And then we can remove these two capacitors. We know that these are the right capacitors. There's only 2 of them, but I'll mark them anyway. And then I'm definitely, after we pull these, I'm definitely going to put them into our tester. And we're going to read, hopefully, a bad cap here. Let's just go ahead, remove our first cap over here, 705. And we'll get over here on the positive leg. Come on, Sutter. Get up there and flow for me. There we go. 705, C705, 16 volt 100. So that's great. Perfect. I almost threw it in the trash bin, but again, we want to keep it aside so we can test it. Because this is, if you go and get a cap kit online from Save on Pet, he doesn't usually include the cap kit that we've done so far, which includes both the neck board and the power supply that we just finished. So this is extra on top of that. All right, here we are. Big fatty bulge. Let's see. Oh, great news! It's got some long legs on it, and you know, ZZ Top was right. She's got legs and she knows how to use them. Let's use those legs. Now I got kids. I drive them to school every morning, which I consider a blessing. You know, they could have to take the bus, but they don't, thankfully, in the mornings. And I take them to school, and they always joke. I try to tell them about like classic rock bands, you know, and like educate them on them. ZZ Top's one of those bands that we talk about. Look at this thing. Woo! 55,044 nanofarads. It's supposed to be 4.7, so it's not like it's 50. I mean, that's not even out of spec for that. But if you look at the ESR, it's on planet 12, 22. We got 22 for the 24 ohms. Super high. Definitely ready to pop there. Yeah, I had to joke with them. You know, they don't really know how to. I try to get them to figure out like the way the bands sound. You know, distinct sounds of the bands, so you can tell when the band comes on. You know, it's like Elvis or who's another one I've been. Oh, the Beatles. Put those on when they come on the radio. I try to ask them who they are. Bon Jovi. Every Bon Jovi song sounds about the same, so you can tell them, hey, what is this? And eventually it's like, oh, they just guessed Bon Jovi and they're right. And same thing with a lot of those other artists. A lot of their stuff sounds the same. All right, so we can get in here now and change out these two capacitors. And because let's face it, if I just let my kids pick, my 7-year-old daughter will pick like Miley Cyrus to listen to all day. And I just can't do it. Can't do it. Hannah Montana. You know? Call me old fashioned. But I can't listen to the Twerk Princess. I can't listen to my 7-year-old daughter sing the Twerk Princess's tunes. And not feel a little bit worried there. You know what I mean? Maybe it's just the Old-fashioned daddy-o and me. Anyway. Hey, from Russia with love. Thank you. Thank you for watching, wherever you may be in the world. I do appreciate you tuning in right now. I'm going to move on to installing the 2 new capacitors. And to make sure that I can do this properly, I'm going to turn off my Hacko FR301. Ooh, yeah, I'm pushing that power. I'm pushing that power to the max because I just saw a flash on my monitor. Oh, man. I know, right? Andy brought up, said I used to think how cringy boy bands were, and now I'll find myself in the grocery store, like, humming it when it comes on for background music and enjoying it, and I'm just laughing. Like, look at me. I used to think this was terrible. Oh man, today's music's got nothing on anything old. You got to basically go backwards, and then when you get tired of like the 80s and the 70s, then you even got to go back further and go to the 60s and 50s. It's just like you got to go backwards for music most of the time. It's just modern stuff, unfortunately. At least the mainstream modern music is nothing fun. Let's install these 2 capacitors now. And just to give you an idea, so we saw that our bad capacitor, which was a 250 volt 4.7 microfarad capacitor, and this is a 250 volt 4.7 microfarad capacitor from IC, which is a good company. It's got long legs, very long legs, because it's never been installed. Let's test it and see what kind of reading we get on a brand new capacitor. I'm going to have to trim just a bit off this one leg because it won't fit down in there together. But we'll see if this one reads any better, worse. Hopefully it's better. It's, again, the last one just read 24 ohms. And, all right, so here, look at this. We've actually got see, we're right in spec. This should be 47. Well, it's 46.5, so that's definitely good. And then our ESR is down to 6.2 ohms. Still a little higher because it's a bigger voltage, bigger voltage but smaller capacitance, only 4.7 microfarads. So that's a big difference. That's how you tell which one's bad, which one's good. Now, somebody was saying, Stan said you were a big Judas Priest fan. I tell you, man, that Rob Halford, he put on a hell of a show whenever I saw him. Man, it must have been, gosh, I want to say 15 years ago, 20 years ago maybe, at this place in Nashville, Tennessee, actually outside of Nashville. It's called Starwood Amphitheater. It was an outdoor stadium, and they would come out and have just these amazing Summer of Rock concerts. And the radio station in Nashville would give, like, certain days you could go and you could get $10 tickets to any show for the entire summer. So one day, the last summer that my friends and I were in high school, we went down to there and bought tickets for the whole season for $10 a show. And one of them, I believe it was, I want to say Ozfest. The headliner was Black Sabbath. So it was a reunion Black Sabbath tour. And I want to say like Slayer was there, but Judas Priest was there. And this show was in the heat of the summer in the Southeast in Nashville, Tennessee. And it was easily over 90 degrees. And also super humid. That's the thing about the Southeast in America. It's super humid during the summer months. So here you have this heat index of like 110 degrees, and Rob Halford's out on stage in outdoor staging in full-on leather garb. I mean, he's got a leather outfit, leather pants, boots, and a full-on leather trench coat, leather gloves. And I mean, just up there kicking ass. And it was the most amazing thing. I couldn't believe it. He like didn't break a sweat. They must have had like 4 dudes on there hiding under the stage with fans pointed at him just to keep him cooled off, because I was sweating just watching him and drinking underage cervezas, which you're not supposed to do, but what can you say? But I just distinctly remember probably them being one of the big surprises of the show. You always go to those big shows and you're like, who's going to surprise me in this show? And Judas Priest was the one, like, out of all the bands at that Ozfest that year. I can't remember who else would have been there. I think those were the big three, but it was definitely one of those all-day ordeals. But that was the lovely late 1990s and early 2000s, you know, like the year 2000. That would have been about that time period. And sadly, not long after that, that whole outdoor concert was shut down and they converted it into homes, like mid-level suburban neighborhood homes. And so the Starwood Amphitheater experience was completely done and gone after that. And again, you just don't also get to go to concerts for $10 anymore. You don't get to go see anybody good for $10. You know, there's way too much money involved anymore. And even in a situation where you have, I mean, these are lawn seats, so it's not, you know, it's open seating, it's on a big lawn, and you're out beyond the amphitheater almost, where like there is a seating area. You're beyond that. All right, now we've got our important things installed, our capacitors, our two capacitors right here. Just make sure that they are oriented the correct direction. And again, we're going to make sure all our parts are not touching each other, no legs are touching each other. Now, one other thing I like to do on these neck boards, just for peace of mind, is I remove this. It's always breaks, so don't worry about it. The legs off this stupid plastic shell, they always break, and this thing is just garbage at this point. It happens 9 times out of 10. But it just covers this potentiometer, which adjusts your horizontal convergence, static convergence. I like to go through here and I like to reflow solder on these points. Now it does increase the cleanup and the time to do it, but there's some points on here, especially like going into the tube, where it's nice to make sure that your solder is good and that you don't have any cold solder joints develop over the next 20 years. Because if they do, you'll have an issue. So don't be afraid to sit in here and reflow solder. And you could go, and honestly, sometimes, depending on the monitor, I'll reflow solder on the entire neck boards. Especially if it shows any signs of wearing out. Because there's not a lot of solder on some of these points, you'll notice really right away. Like that, specifically that connector to the neck of the tube. You could go through here and do all the little ICs. You could do those. And what if you had, now if you had a color problem, you're missing a color, there could be an instance where one of these has gone bad on these heat sinks, because there's one for each color, red, green, and blue. So when those go bad, you'll lose a color. So if you're missing a color, that's something to check out. That's as much soldering as I'm going to do on this board right now. Just that connection to the neck. And then now we need to go back and do it again. Got to go back and clean the board. Clean the board. Clean the spots we just touched up the solder to. We'll let those cool down for a second. We'll go over here and start with our new capacitors that we've installed. And looks nice. You can come over here and do the same on 713. Just using this isopropyl alcohol. Getting the thing cleaned up. One of the bands I'll tell you that I've had a more appreciation for as of late. It's not, I mean, it's nothing groundbreaking or anything. But it is a classic band that I'm sad I'll never really get to see live, and that is Rush. Really, really been going back and enjoying, especially while I'm working, listening to a lot of Rush's music, especially not all just, I'm not talking about like Tom Sawyer and the mainline hits. Of course, Limelight's a pretty awesome song. Even if you get into the lyrics, it's pretty amazing of a song. But there's other ones that are just great all around songs. They got some incredibly well put together, and I think is it the drummer? He's the one who passed away a couple years ago from cancer, and they won't go on tour without him. Yeah, Neil. The Hollies, really? That's awesome. Yeah, it's I did go see somebody that was surprising. I went and saw Willie Nelson last year, and that was a fun experience. But that guy's in his 90s, and he was still putting on a whole show. That was last summer here in Virginia. I went to see Willie. It was pretty funny. They had, he had all this marijuana memorabilia and like his stoner's tent, and it was, the funniest part was everybody, or majority of the people at the concert were the age of my parents, but it smelled like they were all down. They were definitely down, hitting those left-handed cigarettes left and right. But he put on a great show. He had like his kids on there, and his kids were like 50, He's like, he had his Willie Nelson in the family. Could still sing. He couldn't really stand up. He sat down the whole time, which is fine. I sat down most of the time too. But it was a sold out show. People came from all over to see him. It was a very packed show. So, get another Q-tip here because there's a lot of solder flux still on here. I want to make sure I get as much of that as possible off this board. Yeah, it's fun to talk about music, and I definitely noticed, even in my own self, how there were things I thought were, of course, great when I was younger that I realized aren't so great, and other things that I thought were just bad when I was younger, and the truth was I had no real appropriate palate for taste. I didn't really, my tastes back then would have been immature and just not as good as they are today. So, thankfully there's such a vast library of music out there that really, even when you get bored of something, you can go and find something else. It's almost like retro gaming, Get bored of one console, you can move on to another. It's much, much nicer now that we have easy access to so much stuff. All right. I'm just doing a quick inspection of things. Stuff looks good. Give it a little blow off. There we go. Still see it. The problem is you start cleaning these boards, and again, since you went to when it was in the factory, they use this solder flux material on the entire board and leave it there Just look at this. I'll just rub this board. It's like sticky on my finger. You start cleaning something and then it's frustrating because just look how dirty the board is by itself. It'd be nice to have an ultrasonic cleaner to do this, but unfortunately I don't have that. Because if you had that, you could just pop it in there and it would be crystal clear. I have to go through and do it the old-fashioned way here, but that's okay. That's the way everybody can do it that's on a budget. Make sure we rub everything off one more time here. Everything looks good. All right. Is to Scooby. Thank you for the super chat. I appreciate it. Thanks for sharing your tips, tricks, experience with those of us who may not have other ways to see it. Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody. And thank you especially is to Scooby. That's really nice of you to say. And that's one of the things I love about the opportunity I have here, where I get to actually do this fun work and I get to show you what I do. And also that you guys care, and that actually, you know, there's actually somebody that wants to watch this. It's an amazing thing to me to think about also. So thank you. And thank you for the super chat. We're going to do it now. Let's go and get ready to install this and run a test again. Just going to give it one last blow. That's what she said. Oh, man. Anyway, let's connect it back in. I'm just going to slide it back in there. Evenly push this weight against the back of the tube. But before I really do that, I want to connect. I'm not so worried about this ground connection. I'll leave it unconnected. I'm only concerned about the ones on the side, which is high voltage and color commands from our primary A board. So let's do that. Oof. Release the tension on these cables a little bit. And slide this back on there. You want to watch these pins on the tube to make sure that everything lines up. And you just kind of put even pressure. Push it all the way up against the tube back there so it can't go any further. It's nice and even. I don't really want to leave that ground cable floating there just because if something happens, let's just reconnect it to be safe. We don't want it to accidentally short out against something. So there we have it. Board number 2 has been serviced, everybody. And we're going to test it out. Whoops, there we go. Okay. All right, cool. Yeah. All right. We are going to plug in just electricity again and test to make sure that everything looks fine on the monitor. Flip it around here. Wheel her close, and here we go. Knock on wood one more time. Power's going in. I hear the tube coming on. All right. There you have it. All right. We'll let it run for a second, but we seem to have done this next one well too. So we have all of our capacitors changed on our C board and our G board. And then now the only thing left is our A board, which is the big board, which, goodness, I'm not entirely sure that I will have time in this. Well, I really want to finish this thing. I have a hard deadline in about 1 hour. So we'll see if we can make it. If not, we'll have to try to get through it in another stream. But let's not think about that yet. Let's let it run for a second, and hopefully everything will be good. But just so we can see something on the screen, maybe I'll try to get a signal put into it so we can make sure that we definitely have a picture. But I have to clean out and give myself a little bit more space when we move on to the bigger board, because that primary board has a lot more caps that have to be removed and installed. All right, see. And that's it. Let's go ahead and put let me see if I can't get the composite video back into the screen, which I can. We'll get it into the screen. I'm going to let it run for a minute because I need to take a restroom break anyway. And so that'll be a good opportunity. I'll put it back on the screen and I'll go and take about a 10-minute break, 5-10-minute break, and I'll come back. But before I do all that, I'm going to hook this up and we'll look at some patterns. But there really should not be any difference in the picture quality, more than likely. I don't know. I mean, there was that one capacitor that was bad, but I don't believe that's going to cause us to have any real problems. So I'm not going to hook up the waveform monitor. I'm just going to go straight for our PC graphics. And if I show you, if you want to look here on overhead cam, I'll show you. This is the spark plug unit. So it just clicks in the back there. You can run RGB out of that device, or you can use composite out of it. It's an interesting one, but we're going to be using it for composite just because that's what I was using with the waveform monitor, and that's what we can easily test here. And let me get the console connected. It's plugged in. Let's go 1A, and then we'll plug this in behind it. I do have some people asking things I think about. I haven't been able to watch every second of the chat, but some people were asking about maybe RGB modifications and stuff. So good news is I ran a poll, and it looks like the vast majority of people on that poll want to see me RGB mod a Sony. So coming up on a real full episode, we're going to do that. This is just live stream stuff, but we'll do that in an upcoming episode. We'll do an RGB modification over there. Let's get that menu out of the way, and there we go. Look at that. Let's get something on the screen. This is the old EverDrive for this. It's not the new one with like the CD quality graphic games. This is the old school one, so not anything cool really there. If anybody has any requests, I'll first pull up our tester. So we do have a 240p test suite in this one, and again, it does have some good test patterns in it. Again, we're in composite right now, so everything looks fine though. If we pull up like the color bars, there's nothing, there's no issue. It's starting to go in and out of focus, which I apologize for. It's having a hard time really focusing on anything specifically. I try to get it to maybe key in down here, but if we look at this one, doesn't have the monoscope grids in it, unfortunately, but it does have the other video tests. So we've got a scroll test. And let's go, this is the better resolution. So it's not as the exact same as the other. It's not the exact same as the other 240p test suite, but it's good. You know, it works great. So, well, while this runs, it's not a problem. We're gonna let it run for like 5 to 10 minutes. I'm gonna put, I'll put it back on our main camera here, and I'll make a note in the chat and let everybody know. But I'm going to go, and I'll take a short restroom break right now. I'm going to put this on something else to run, and it'll just run in the background. But I don't know that maybe Air Zonk is a good one, because I think it's got a cool little video. At least you can see some shots of the screen working. And we'll come back. Let me come back and yeah, there we go. So I'll let this run, and we'll come back and in a minute and finish this up as long as I have the time. And I will be right back, everybody. I'm going to take, again, a short restroom break. Thank you for your patience. Okay, thank you everybody. Thank you for your patience and giving me a second there. Get stuff regrouped. We're gonna get back in here now and actually get this main board out now and service it. So I'm just gonna start disconnecting and turning off all the stuff first, but just want to make sure when you're doing this stuff that you are taking your time also to remember to be safe when you do this, because obviously we're dealing with high voltage and things like that, so we want to make sure that we don't make any mistakes. So I've got that all powered down, power supply on. We're gonna get ready to take this CRT apart now. And we'll flip it around. And I'm gonna show you what is hopefully the easiest way to get all this disconnected. Hopefully you'll see this. And then if you're ever daring enough to have to, or try to take your CRT like apart. You may have just figured me out, Chris. Displaced Gamers is here. My good friend. And that's all we need is just some easy listening and a CRT going. Just let the kids walk in here and play it randomly. But yeah, we're about to actually take the main board out now finally. We've gotten through. And if you just are coming in now after the break, the first 2 hours of the stream, we went and we serviced our neck board right here. And then our power supply right here. And that's two of the primary important boards on this monitor. So they've been serviced, they've been tested. You got to see them tested pretty thoroughly there for a second. And now we got to move on to this main board. Okay? So obviously now it's time to discharge. And that's why we got this nice speakeasy music going here, you know? Is this the last time you'll ever see Steve on a live stream? Probably not, but that's a good thing. All right, so some things we need to be aware of. We're gonna pull this board. The way it works is this main board down here, it has to be pulled out, like towards away from the CRT, similar to this board. But we're pulling a big board now. So it gets a little bit more tricky, and make sure everything's in the view here. Pull this guy out of the view a little bit. And what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to leave as much of this up here as possible, okay? So I need to just disconnect some points. I'm going to show you. I'll try to flip it around so you can see. Oh, I like jazz, of course. Well, I mean, sometimes I pop on the Kenny G and really groove. You think I'm joking, but I'm not. I listen to a lot of great stuff, you know? Like I said, I used to think Kenny G was a joke, and now I'm like blown away by his stuff. Anyway, we're going to unplug this one. This one goes to our deflection yoke, okay? It goes from the main board to the deflection yoke. Got to unplug that one. Another cable we're going to unplug is over here on this side. Well, yeah. No, see, so I'm trying to think of the best. Well, let's just do it like that. So I've got to disconnect this cable on this side. It goes up to the neck board, and it loops through on the side over here on the input board. Got to disconnect that. Flip it around to the other side. And, woo, sorry about that. I've got to deal with some stuff right in this area. And it's going to be difficult for me to show you that part. But there's like a ground junction right behind where my finger is. Lift up and so you can see this right here. Where my hand is. Get the right view angle. See this? So I have to disconnect one of these. One of these points goes to the main board down here. Down here. Oops, sorry. One of these points goes to the main board down here. I have to disconnect that. And then another one goes and travels on towards the tube. I have to disconnect that one too. There's 2 points on here. Well, sorry. One point, the one that's connected to the board, that one can stay, the long one. We'll disconnect it here so we can pull that whole thing away from the input board. I know that's a little confusing sounding. Why not just pull this camera and move it around a little bit more, since we're going to be disassembling most of this part of the video. So, make sure I get the right cable. This one. It's the middle one right here. It's got to come out. And then the other middle one's got to come out too. Yes, I'm sorry everybody, I am fully clothed. You may get to see some kneecap. All right, so see how that just lifts up and we got this out of the way. We got that. We want to just leave this free floating. We're also going to disconnect this black and red connection right here. Just pulls apart pretty easily like that. There we go. We'll disconnect, not that. That can stay, that can stay. Oh, we will disconnect our... my hand is going in here, and I'm about to disconnect this cable over at this end where it's in the main board, but I can scoot the main board back a little bit at this point. I should be able to. Yes, see, slides. That's how we'll get it out ultimately, sliding it out. Slide it out, Stevie. Just slide it on out of there. All right, now I've disconnected the neck board, and then there's some front connections in the front that I have to get to. But hey, before I do that, we got to do the 1 second dealio here, right? I'm going to sit here and softly whisper as I take my right hand and calmly discharge this tube. Now, folks, if you're not a professional like me, then you should definitely not do this. Especially not live streaming. And especially not just sitting here. You know, if you've never done this. Thankfully, I've done this 100 times last week, so I can just do it like this, you see? I've got that calm look on my face. And I've taken the anode cap off now here. And what I can do at this point is discharge this anode cap and the tube still, just to be safe. I don't want to not be safe. So we'll connect to some metal on the frame here. Where should we go to? Let's just go straight to the frame itself right there. And then we'll just tap right here. Tap, tap, tap. Nothing. Tap here. Nothing. So, thankfully, our Sony has self-discharged. And it always, just like the vast majority of people in your lives, it self-discharges. And I have seen it one time not self-discharge. I've seen one time where I've actually done that procedure and it sparked, and it was a 20-inch PVM, similar to this. So it does happen, but that's literally one time out of probably 500 of these I've done. But now we have this cable free. Swing around here. Get you a little bit different view. I need to get this off the GA board over here. We'll leave that dangling. Get that out of the way. Everything else is out of the way. Now, there are a couple of points. Ah, that's a better view. Do you see, folks? Do you see down in here? Right here. Right there. That's where we have to pull those cables from. Right there. So let me see if I can get a better view down in there. Oof, this is a tough spot right here. This is a tough spot. Okay. Excuse the low light. We'll try to get to focus on something. We're trying to get these cables down here out by my fingers. There's 3 sets of cables here, right where my finger is. We need to get those disconnected. And then there's another set of 3 cables on the other side that we also have to disconnect. And those are just pull up and they come out. The other side does have ones with some like a hook on it. But there's 3 on each side. Okay. Okay. I think everything is good. Disconnect from the power supply. Oh, free floating. Okay. Now, if you do decide to do all this servicing in just one go, oh, there's one more up here. I'm sorry, I forgot the tally light. The tally light cable right there. Forgot to pull that. Didn't see it. There we have it. Full board out. And this is a good time if you want to clean in here to get back in there and clean all that area out if you need to. I'm going to zoom out a little bit and get ready to show you what this board is all about and what it looks like. Let's move some stuff around. Probably going to need to zoom out on the overhead view and go on over so we can get a better shot of this. And you can get an idea of the A board and how it looks. It's pretty complex. It's the most complex and intimidating of all the boards in the M series monitors. And that's really just because of all the components on both sides. A lot of components in here. Okay. But we're not even ready to work on it just yet. Let me see if I can get that a little bit better so you can see more of this end. This is the more important end. We have our flyback right in here. First thing I want to do is I want to get this input board out of the way. There are some tabs right here where my thumb is. See that? Just pull that tab out a little bit. Lift up on that input board. Do it on each side. There we go. Now we can disconnect these cables up top. Stan, I do have a Discord server, but I have to keep it for Patreons only. Patreon people. So I'm sorry. There is one available to the Patreon members. If you're interested, go check out the link in the description of this stream. All right, that's it. That's it. Just get the input board off and out of the way. Barely, I think I've seen it once or twice. Has there ever been a problem with the input board? And I have seen it, but I have seen it happen. But this is your input board. You don't really normally have to do anything with this. Doesn't have to be serviced any more than just cleaned. No, 9 times out of 10. So we just set that out of the way for right now. And now we have the rest of our board. There are 4 screws in here. Okay. We have Phillips head screw here, here, over here on the right hand side, or the other side too. And then finally, there's one screw where my pin is pointing down in here, attaching the flyback to the plate. So we need to remove all 4 of these screws, and then the board will be out and ready to service. It does come in handy to have a set of tweezers or pliers, for example. It makes it easier to grab some of these screws. And sometimes you'll have capacitors that are in hard to reach areas. So you'll have to remove them and insert new ones. And you can't, I mean, I don't know about you guys. I have big old fat sausage fingers that just can't fit in between a lot of these pieces. And so I'm stuck a lot of times using tweezers and pliers. There I am again. I'm trying to say tweezers. Twires. What is that? Okay. So here's the deal with music. I have a subscription to a company. It's called Epidemic Sound. And I'm allowed to play their music, copyright, free. Or it's not free. I pay, right? I pay for it. And that's the music you're hearing. The jazz mixes from that. And if you'd like, I could probably go pull up some other music here, so we don't have to keep listening to the same 10 songs over and over again. But whoa, slippery fingers. Okay, I've got this out of the plate. It's similar to the piece of plastic you saw an hour ago on that power supply. That's pretty much all there is to it. You just want to remember that it does have some tabs up here on the sides where my finger is that hold the board in place, one on each side. And then it has places where the board slips down into. That's pretty universal design. Sony kept that for a while. Set that out of the way. And then we can look at this main board. Now, I tried to warn you. This monitor has tons of capacitors, okay? And not only capacitors, but other parts all scattered throughout the entire board here. Yeah, the music did stop, Joshua. I forgot to put the playlist on repeat, but we can do that real quick here. But anyway, so this board, it's intimidating, okay? There we go. Because it's got so many parts on it. It's got some of these chips, cards, probably about 200 capacitors, electrolytic capacitors, all on this side, which is the main top side of the board. But even more devastating to the novice is the bottom side of this board. Just look at it. You have all kinds of tiny surface mount components right here, all over this side of the board. So this is a double-sided board, and to do this particular cap kit, you will be forced to work within the confines of these small areas, and you'll have to remove these capacitors. So, whoa, didn't mean to do that. Anyway, just knocked against the neck board, so hopefully I didn't just do something to the tube. Didn't mean to do that. I was putting that cap kit out of the way. So these are all kinds of this monitor is doing so much stuff, it's hard to say. The capacitors that we do have that we're concerned with are on this list right here. Thankfully, I've done this so many times that I know where the capacitors are, and I'm going to try to just buzz through this like a normal working day for me. But this is the list of the capacitors, and I accidentally crossed this one out, but it should not be crossed out. So I need to add it back. And what is that one? That is a 2200 microfarad, 25 volt. Okay, so these are the ones that have to do with deflection and are the ones that we are concerned with. So I need to let my desoldering tool heat up, and we're just going to start. I'm going to roll into removing these capacitors, and I'm not going to do much as far as there will be some ones that I'll stop and I'll highlight, and I'll probably start with those. Those are the most important ones, the ones that actually have more to do with specifically the deflection. Let me see if I can get this thing to come out anymore. Yeah. Okay, so that's like these capacitors right up in here, like these two right here next to this heatsink. Those cause the red green blue line issue with vertical blanking, these two. So they're very important to change out. All around here, this cluster of 4 has to do with deflection. This one does, this one does, this one does. There's 3 or 4 in this area that do. But again, we're not changing all of them. We're going to change a lot of them, but not all of them. We're going to change 28 of them. 28 of them. I think my desoldering tool is all set up. We're going to go ahead and get started. First cluster will be like in here. There's 3 of them that we need to get out of here. And so I'm going to kind of, let me make sure I can get you guys a good view where you can at least see what see that I'm doing something. And so like I said, I'm going to try to get these out. And C202, I believe that's on our list. 204, 206, and 207. 207 is sideways right here, where my thumb is. Right here. Definitely gotta have a smooth hand, because some of these connection points, they connect to the top and the bottom of the board, and the traces go different places. So that's an issue. And also some of them connect to 2 or 3 different points specifically. So that's always an issue too. It's very, very tricky to work on this specific board. And it does take a while, you know, to get used to doing it on a board like this. But this is the main board where you're going to have all the problems come from if you do have an issue. It's more than likely this board. This is where all your deflections being dealt with. Sometimes these things just don't want to break free. You can't keep heat on them too long because you don't want to damage the board. Free. See, so I'm gonna have to probably add a little bit of solder on to this other point here because it's gotten where if I stick it on there it'll probably burn the board unless I add some, and I can use like the FR301 to solder with too, especially if I'm just using it to desolder something. So I'll just usually put a dab of solder on the tip there. Get it on the part that I need to get rid of. I have to get the 204. Now we should have a big old blob of solder to remove, so safely heat that up, move that part around. And I did it again. Alright, this is a tricky one, but don't worry, it happens. So you gotta just get in here, and we'll turn the regular soldering iron on. We'll have to reflow the solder on it with that, and we might just pull it out. Grab a hold of that guy. Okay. There we go. See, so now I've got it sticking straight up. Sometimes you just got to do that because it makes it hard when they're pressed against the board, like the leg of the capacitor that you're trying to remove. And this is another thing that, you know, is a testament to patience. Do you have the patience to do it? And get it out of there. Oh, that's a good one. See, all that time and we've only gotten 2 capacitors out. 204 is out. 207 is out. 206. 208. So 208's over here. And 206 is in another area, but 208 is right here next to these in this little cluster over here. Right in this section. So need to get this little cap out, and we'll be done with this block. See, what you got to be careful of is sliding that tool and hitting one of those surface mount caps or like resistors and knocking it off. That would be deadly. And I think we got her. I think we do. Make sure on the top side that I don't know. There we go. It's just like hanging on by a little thread. There we go. 208 is out. We have 50 volt 10. So the caps that were used in this monitor from Sony are, vast majority of them are 85 gaps Celsius. So that means that they'll wear out quicker than their counterparts, which would be 105 degrees Celsius. So that's what I've switched all the capacitors to, is the 105 degrees Celsius one. And right now I'm just trying to get some materials out of this, clean this up a little bit, make sure it's still sucking properly. This FR301, cleaning out the filter that catches all the solder materials. So put that back together. It is like muscle memory. You, just like with any job, if you do it long enough and are good at it, stick to it, you learn how to do it really quickly and efficiently. I think I've got a little issue right here, though. Looks like this spot right here needs to be desoldered because the solder, it didn't clear out of the hole enough, and I won't be able to stick a new capacitor in that hole. Till I get all the solder out. There we go. Clean as a whistle. So is there three holes right here? I don't know if you can turn that light out. If you can see it, where my finger is right here. So there are holes. See, our cap's been removed there, and there. And that's that 3 cluster. And now we're on to this cluster over here. We'll move on to this cluster. We'll have to do this one and these two, this one. That's the biggest. We're gonna try to run through and try to pull a bunch of these at once. Hopefully they all won't stick. If they do take a long, sometimes you get into some boards and whatever the solder from it sticks a lot and you're stuck, reflowing solder on every cap point just to suck it out. Which is a lot of time, which is time consuming. 522, there we go. That's a good one to get out. Come in here and yep, folks, this is the excitement of a Thursday evening. Afternoon. Pull in capacitor. Nothing better else to do. Alright. That's the right one. That's the right one. Thanks, Stan. I appreciate that. Although, I might be in a small pond there. Not a lot of channels probably dedicated to just CRTs mostly. I do other things too, you guys know that, but most of it's themed around CRTs or retro stuff, tech, obviously retro tech, right? So okay. sticking with the wiggle trick, where once I get the solder molten, wiggle that part. There we go. That one out of the way. Oh, nice. A museum with arcade machines. That sounds cool. Okay. That cap is out. C595. Now, what's up with the other hole? It doesn't look very clear on one side, but it does on that side. Sometimes you can stick the end of these. And yeah, it's good. Sometimes, you know, a little piece of solder will get stuck in there or something. You can clear it through with the good pair of tweezers. Now we're going to remove 507 right here, right up next to this heatsink, and it's a good example of why the capacitors in the deflection zone fail, because they're on the high voltage areas, and, or not all of them, but you know, it's pretty close in proximity to the flyback. Most of them are, but they're also really close to a lot of components that generate tons of heat. That's why the ones especially right next to heat sinks are troubled and prone to failure. I'm getting one here that's not wanting to get molten. Okay, we got her broken free. Let's see what we got here. It smelled a bit fishy. Bit fishy. You know what that means? It means it's a little bit suspect. There's that zone right there cleared out, right at this heat sink. See that? Zone where my thumb is? Right in there. Right there. Those four are now removed. And again, those are really key for deflection. You got to get those out. Then I'll move on to the ones beside it. C596. Now these cap kits like this are something that I've developed for a lot of CRTs. I don't have them for every CRT. I mean, mostly it's Pro monitors, and it's mostly Sony stuff. And it's something I'm evolving ever evolving is the capacitor kit lists for CRTs over on the Patreon Discord. So this kit that I have today is linked under the Discord, and you can go there and get this and print it off and run your own kit, make your own kit that way. I do not actually sell capacitor kits at the moment. I just think it's better for everybody to make them on their own if they know how to, and if you can't, it's something that's good to learn if you're going to start doing this. Understanding the capacitors is important part of knowing what to do. Okay, this is one of the two most important capacitors in the deflection block. The 160 volt 1 microfarad capacitor. It's in line for the vertical blanking, so that's when that red green blue line problem happens. That eventually shorts out the whole monitor and blows the flyback if you don't correct it, or if the error happens and you don't fix it in time, you just let it go. can really damage everything on the board. It can blow out the hot, which is this. There's another capacitor. It says a 164.7. So those are the two that cause the failure. Those two right there. Out of all of them, these two right here are the ones that cause the failure if they fail. And then they'll blow out the hot, which is over on this right there, and blow that thing. It'll just blow it, and then eventually it'll blow the flyback if you don't take care of it. It just all happen at once and ruins the chassis, because it's not easy getting a flyback. So now we're going to move on to the caps next to that and get this one too over here. These three have to go. Some of these have to go. I think this one with the this one right here needs to go, and so do a few others beside that one. But first, let's go down here, work on these. Ooh, let's see. You're gonna be difficult. I don't really like to turn the heat up any higher than, honestly, the first setting on this, if you're just doing cap work, because nothing's worse than sticking this against the board and then burning the darn trace off. Whoops. I mean, absolutely nothing. Goodness. This guy's not going to come out either. Let's take a look at the top. It's not got, it's just super tight. Super tight. We go. There we go. Thanks, Stan. Have a good night. I'm gonna reflow solder. Be sure to check back in at the end of the stream tomorrow and see if we actually get this thing running. I'm gonna put some extra in the 585 hole there. It's a beautifully cleaned hole. Could eat out of that hole. It's so clean. All right. I tell you, man, I'm moving at a snail's pace. A snail's pace here. But that's just what happens when you get old, you know? And I'm about to be officially over the hill, so I can't expect to be as fast as I was in the last decade. Man is staring down his mortality. The only thing that keeps me really excited is to know that Save on Pat continues to do what I'm doing into his 90s. So maybe there's something about this that keeps you young and keeps you living. I don't know. I just don't know. Oh, I'm trying to get 2-for-1, do a 2-for-1 special here. I think I did it. Loosen up a couple at a time. And I'll flip this over, and then I'll just pull them out. Like, let's get the pliers here. We'll yank them like a couple of teeth. Good. Clean. Good. Clean. Excellent stuff so far. So now we're going to move on to some other zones here. And I definitely have to remove this one. Put my thumb on it up here, this big cap, 586. This is where you get into the tricky stuff that's right up next to some of these other components. And sometimes the solder gets hot and then cools real quickly. There we go. Here's another one. Bigger one, 25 volt, 1000 microfarads. And then, where are we after that? 581 is on the list. 581, which is like right underneath that one. It's a smaller one. Ooh. Slipped my finger there, but thankfully I didn't. This one's not being cooperative at all. Oh, there we go. It's broken free. Never mind. Okay, so that one should be loose and ready to go. 581. Give me a tooth. 581. There we go. Clean out of the hole. And there's a couple more down in this cluster area that we're going to need to remove. 570. I see that one. Boy, some of these are just way up in here. $70. Is that a big one? Yeah, that's a big one. Okay. Excuse me. This one's gonna take a little bit of finesse. Okay, got one leg loosened. I'm gonna have to reflow, because there was not very much solder on that right there to begin with. Give it a little extra, and this guy's got to come out now. I'm gonna try to get under there and bend the leg of that straight a little bit, so. Okay. These capacitors can be just a pain to get in there and get loose, but make sure that I'm not ripping the board up. Because started to go, and then there we go. It's still gonna need to be cleaned out again, but it's just difficult sometimes. Difficult to get that out. It's just wants to be cranky sometimes, you know? Like down in this area. Some of them just do not want to get out of there. Usually it's the ends that are on these bigger ground plates. They can take a lot more heat, so they have a lot more room for that heat to spread. And when it spreads, you know, it's spread out. It's not as hot in one spot, the one spot you need. There you go. Nice cleaned up little spot there. All right, continuing on. We are got number 570 and 581. And what's the other new one? There's a 564, 579. It's over here too, somewhere. 564 is like right up in here. This is gonna be a tough one. 564, that's 15. Yeah, see, so this is like this one right here. This one right here, my finger's on. That's the one that's got to come out next. This one. So, alright. There looks like enough solder on it to pull it without adding more, maybe. We'll see. But it's like wedged in between a happy couple of surface mount capacitors. Awesome. Oh yeah, that's gonna need more solder. Tell you folks. I mean, I tell you what. There's no rest sometimes. You got a hanger here again. Problem isn't so much that it needs to be reflowed. The problem is that the legs of the capacitor are bent in a fashion that makes it so difficult to really use that to any effectiveness, the desoldering tool. So as that puff of smoke comes and hits you in the screen, let's okay. Top one is completely broken free. Trying to get this bottom. Ooh, goodness gracious. And that's what they call test. A test, folks. A highly skilled individual has to look at that's just crazy. Like how that's sandwiched in between all these little components right there around it, all around it. Oh man, look at that. See, it's got this surface mount capacitors and resistors right there. And all it takes is one small slip to mess those things up. Alright, 579. Where are you, mister? Some of these, I will admit, some of these are different. There it is, right there. Than the actual kit that I got. A couple of these capacitors are new to the kit. And so it's a little bit expanded. That's why it's written in hand ink under the main kit. I'm about to get to the point on this where I'm considering reflowing the solder ahead of time on just the rest of this kit, but every time I say that, I'll get one leg clean. See, then the other leg just doesn't. The other leg just doesn't want to do it. Man, so we're getting... See, that's the problem with this board compared to like the last board. It's just a lot easier. And this is getting... A lot of the heat is getting removed from the board because it's right next to like a big heat sink plate. We'll break it loose like that and suck it all out. Suck it all out. Get this cap out of there. All right. So there we go. $523 and 5. Got to get three of these that are really close to the main, like this video chip or something right here. I'm not sure actually what kind of chip it is, but it's got a couple of important caps around it. You'd think this stuff would want to get broken out of here, but you know, it's like 25 years of being in one spot and you don't want to leave. This 523 is loose. You get 541 down here. Well, I've got it on this side. There's one of these down here. Which one? Second one. It's this one right here. Need to get it out. That's the trick, baby. You gotta get a little more, of course, heat on the bottom end. It's always the negative. We're getting too much heat on that. Gonna have to switch over. Reflow the solder. Oops, I think they just fell out. It did. So we'll just suck the solder out then. Excellent. So there goes that capacitor. And I know I had another one in here that I had gotten to get them pliers for it. That's a tricky one. That's a tricky one. Right there. Perfect. All right, what was the other one in the 523, 541, and a 529? I believe that's 549. I believe this one in here beside this transformer. So that's another transformer, which I had mentioned earlier today. 529. We're going to go ahead and put some extra solder on this one because I don't think it's going to just come right off the way it's looking. $529. To get your kids' college plan, the $529. Let's get rid of $529. This one's a bit tougher to break free. Do you think it would want to, right? Want to break free. It just fell out, I think. Yep. Of course, it's so... Do the job right in the first time, and look, it just falls right out. Okay. Down to... close to the end here. We are getting close to the end of the decap. The only thing left are this cluster over here. This cluster over here. No. And that's it. The rest of them have been removed. So go ahead now and start pulling these, and then there'll be no more caps to remove in this whole set. There's, you know, you'll always have the hot. You see this one right here. The reason it's sticking, again, it's on the major ground loop. So it's actually connected to its ground plate, making it darn near impossible to just easily suck the solder out of it. So the heat gets so dissipated. Okay. Great though. I mean, it comes out nice, and even after having to do the extra like step, you're again better to take your time. This is such a amazing board, but if you think this one's bad, you should check out, you know, like that's maybe what I'll do next. We'll try to work on like a L series monitor next. It's a little bit more high tech, like the L5 or something, and see if we can't get it to look good on camera. Again, that's one of my favorites to work on, even though it's a pain in the neck. I mean, it's not easy. Such a cool CRT though. Just a couple more caps here. I'm trying to get them out as quick as possible, but not as quick as possible, I guess. So as quick and safely as doable. I don't want to make any errors on the home stretch here. If I look over here correctly, I believe we're down to like 2 or 3 more capacitors that need to be removed, which is wonderful. Great, we've got... Oh, come on. Got it out of there. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Just one more. Yes. Yes. Excellent. So here we've got it. We've got our cluster over here. That's been removed now. Let me turn that light down. Add some better lighting. So this cluster has been removed over here on this side. Some of them, there's a couple over here that have been removed. And then if we look over here, this is the deflection area pretty much. See? You know, we've got this one. A couple over here. These again are the red, green, blue line ones. deflection ones, deflection ones. The 3 we removed from here, deflection ones. And then there's again like the 8 or 9 sporadic that we removed from in here. And that's where we are for right now on the restorations. We got all the caps out and the cap kit's ready. So now we just need to install capacitors, and it looks like I have come across my deadline for time. This is a 3-hour stream today. So just like there's not enough multi-format monitors in the world, there's not enough time in the world ever. So let me check out one quick item, and then we may just have to, yeah, we're going to, guys, I am going to have to call this a day for right now. And look, I promise you, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave all this alone, and I might be able to come back later tonight and finish the stream up, get the second half of this thing done, because I'd really love to get an opportunity to talk to Keith Rainey again, so we can actually get this like color calibration thing working out with this. But I just didn't have enough time to get the caps installed. So look for another one of these kind of streams coming very soon. And I'll either, today, tomorrow, I'll come back, I'll recap this board, we'll put it back in the monitor here, and we'll test it out, and then we'll check out some of the adjustment stuff that has to happen to it. But that's going to be it for now, and part 1 is done. So I thank you for watching. If you happen to come in kind of late to the stream, it looks like we kicked it over 3 hours today, so you'll be able to come back and check this. I'll have it listed as part 1, and then I'll come up with a part 2, and we'll finish it up with some calibration, and that'll be all. Thank you again, everybody. I appreciate all the super chats and everybody being here. Look for another stream.